Grønn torsdag.
Thank you for the first webinar with Fadi and Korea. And Dr. Allouch are very pleased to have with us. My name is Rania Maktabi. I'm a political scientist and I am an associate professor at Østfold University College in Norway. And to have a conversation on Syria is at the crossroads. It's an extremely important state in the region across the middle between volatile states, Israel, Iraq, Lebanon. We don't talk very much about Jordan, but you know, half of Jordan are Palestinians, so Jordan is also important. But we keep it. It's very peaceful, so it's sort of boring in a way, but it's an important state. If we are keen on understanding how things, have an idea of how things could be, small states which are stable are also interesting. But a state which is very. So Syria at a crossroads. Dr. Mustapha Allouch, I would like to have you join us. I know that you are outside Lebanon, but you are originally from Tripoli in Lebanon. You have had an experience as a member of parliament in the Lebanese parliament, elected between 2005 2009. You are originally a surgeon. So when I call you a doctor, then this means you work with a body. I'm a doctor with words only with words. So I'm pleased to have you with us. I would like you to start by, telling us why Syria is so important. Why is Syria special?
Thank you for having me. As you said, I'm a surgeon, but I have been involved in politics since I was like 12 years old. And I used to read newspaper because my parents used to read it. But I was also part of a political party, a militant political party, when I was 12 years old as well, and mostly involved with the Palestinian issue. I thought that I was a Marxist during my early years of my life, though I didn't understand anything about Marxism. But later, slowly, I became a social liberal or socialist liberal during my life. I'm also doing my PhD in philosophy, and I'm involved mostly with political philosophy and in the effect of the modernism on the being or on us. Anyway, to start with, my interest in Syria, I already wrote, I co-authored and authored two books, two novels about Syria. One is a Syrian tale called A Syrian Tale that will be translated soon to English, and another one which is also will be translated soon is Murmurs in a Syrian Military Post in Lebanon. And both of these speak about the 20th century, 21st century history of Syria, and about the relation between sectarian issues and political issues, also tribal issues, or these. However, Syria has played a major role because of its geography. And if we rely now that the first Adam and Eve came from Africa and crossed to the Middle East, probably they inhabited Syria in the beginning, or the Fertile Crescent. So probably the first, we know now that the first three major cities, between brackets, were in Syria and in Palestine: Ebla and Jericho, and definitely Ugarit were one of the first in history. And this area have been a passage across the world. So probably everyone in the world passing from east to west, from Africa to Asia, from Europe to Asia. All of these crossroads were there. So this is why it was a very heavy area, and we have to remember all the messengers from God, between brackets, were concerning the Abrahamic religions, were based in this region.
I would like to cut short in and say, you know, we have short time. I would really like to say, because you know so much about Syria, could you please tell us about what is the difficult political internal struggles in Syria today? Because it's a complex situation, and we have a new regime after, you know, like 10 years of civil war. And then suddenly last year, a new regime has come. Could you please give us a picture of why Syria is so complex? Why did it take 10 years before we got sort of rid of Bashar al-Assad's regime?
Well, definitely you cannot start with a certain event in order to dissect the situation. But since this certain event is based on history, I will go briefly over the recent history, at least since 1946, 47, when Syria became independent from France, so-called, and then a series of coups d'etat started in 49, then a period of certain type of democracy, tensions between factions, mostly political, and probably this was the only political period that Syria had. Between 47, probably till 1958, when Nasser became the president of Syria and Egypt and the United Arab. However, underneath all of this was always the minority issue. And the Ba'ath Party, for instance, was not established by a Sunni. It was established by a Christian Orthodox, Michel Aflaq. And even later, the Ba'ath Party, the Syrian National Social Party was also established by a Lebanese Christian. So this is another issue. And later, most of the Baathists who were in power were from the minorities. Hafiz al-Assad, Salah Jdid, Muhammad Amran, and even from other, they were all Alawite, other minorities, Kurdish, not Kurdish, Druze, Ismaili, all of them, and some Sunnis. So these parties were always based that you have a huge majority, which is a Sunni, and then you have they wanted to find their role in the society by being part of these parties. So in 1958, Syria became united, or Nasser was the president. In 1961, first coup d'etat regained what is called a short-lived democracy to Syria, but it was a tribal democracy. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party made it its own coup. In 1966, the Ba'ath Party made another coup on its own, and the local Ba'athists took over, Salah Jdid mainly, and Hafiz al-Assad. And then in 1970, Hafiz al-Assad made his own coup. He called it a reform coup, but in fact, it brought him to that place.
And this, could I please cut down, because I really want you to dwell on that, because this is the 1970 coup, which started what we today know most about Syria. It's this autocratic, authoritarian legacy. So what you told us now was the minority, more progressive outsiders who together wanted to introduce change. There was multi-political parties from the 50s until the 60s, and then 70 was the start of the authoritarian period. Could you sort of tell us more about the political repression, which we know Syria most of today. This is what we really know about Syria, the political repression.
Well, in 1970, people thought that Hafez al-Assad will start another era because the Ba'ath regime before him was very much, they believed that they are dogmatic leftists, but in fact they were, they suppressed also. They had their own suppression for. But in the beginning, Hafez al-Assad tried to make reconciliation with the Sunni majority, and he presented himself as a Muslim at that time. And slowly, however, he convinced a lot of merchants that this will be that, and these are mostly Sunnis, that this will be a new era until the late 1970s and early 1980s, when the Muslim Brotherhood started an uprising against him. And this was a very, very tense period where thousands, probably tens of thousands of casualties occurred between both sides, the regime, which is mostly supported by the Alawite, and the Sunnis from the Muslim Brotherhood. And the point, the pivotal point was the Hama siege in 1982, where it is estimated that 35 inhabitants of the city were killed by the regime at that time, mainly by the brother of Hafez al-Assad, Rifat al-Assad, who was the leader of this attack.
You mean 35,000, huh?
35,000, yes.
Yes.
And this is documented. Now, I'm not just throwing numbers. And it was until in 1986, another clash started between Hafez al-Assad and his brother. And the tension became so malicious that Damascus was the arena. And it was only that the mother of Hafez al-Assad interrupted the showdown and convinced Rifat al-Assad to step aside and leave his brother to lead at that time. So imagine the whole city was going under fire unless this has happened. Anyway, the intervention of Hafez al-Assad in Lebanon in 1976 gave him a way out, and he governed Lebanon and Syria with the aid of the so-called intelligence, and thousands of casualties went down in Syria and in Lebanon because of that. Among them are the Palestinians as well. I will not go over this period because it's a long talk. I have lived through all of this, and I know day by day what has happened. But let's jump to the end. In 1980, Hafez al-Assad died. Sorry, in 2000. In 2000, Hafez al-Assad died. And the only heir for Hafez al-Assad was Bashar, because his brother died a few years before. And it was the brother of Hafez al-Assad who was a suspect in killing Bas al-Assad, the first son of Hafez al-Assad. Bashar came in. People thought that this will be a new era of glasnost compared to...
We called it the Damascus Spring, didn't we?
It was called Damascus Spring, but it didn't last for more than a year or so, because it was obvious that Bashar al-Assad will not make the real change in the life of people. He make just imaginary changes. People can go to the discos, can speak English, can speak French, and the upper class started showing that they have some type of freedom in doing what was not allowed socially during the days of his father. But when the invasion of Iraq started, Bashar al-Assad retreated back and thought that he will be the next on the list. And this
In 2003, you mean? The US invasion in 2003.
Bashar al-Assad felt that he needed to coalesce more and to rely mostly on the Alawite community. And at that time, his alliance with Iran started to consolidate more because he thought that he needed a strong ally in order to support itself. The next
I would like to just ask you and just clarify, because it's really interesting to have a very secular regime, the Syrian working and collaborating with a very theocratic regime, the Iran, after 2003. And also this, I would like you to also to focus on this, how the secular Syrian regime collaborated also by becoming more religious, with supporting fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalists in a way. This is really an interesting period.
Well, the Syrian regime is not secular by attitude or by thoughts. It's pragmatic, and whatever is needed to support its hegemony on Syria or even on Lebanon, they used it. So at some times, in fact, during the reign of Hafez al-Assad in Lebanon, he used to support Islamist group to kidnap Western subject or people in Lebanon, and then these people were released in Damascus. So it's the diplomacy of using extremism in order to say that this is me, I am at least better than these extremists. And this is how Hafez al-Assad used even Hezbollah during the early period before Bashar al-Assad fell under the hegemony of Iran. It's by bargaining with the Arabs, with the world, with the West, to say that you can bargain with me, but I will use these issues in order to stay in power. Support me to stay in power. Don't undermine my presence in Syria, and everything will be all right. I can negotiate with the worst people in the world in order to keep this balance. So he kept excellent relation with the Gulf regimes, good relation with Syria, good relation with Algeria, and definitely he had his way to go to France, to go to Europe, to go to even United States. Definitely didn't go personally, but he had his channels and routes all the time in order to channel.
I remember. I just remember. Syria was part of the axis of evil in 2003, and then after the economic crisis, the financial economic global crisis in 2008, we saw pictures of President Bush shaking hands with the president of Syria, which was sort of the state of axis of evil. So you are quite right. This turn, the pragmatic way in which Bashar al-Assad could rule. And I would like you now to move on to the 2011 and the revolts, because what you are saying is that there was repression coupled with pragmatism. But at one point, and that was, of course, after Tunisian revolts in 2010, in December, and I myself was in Beirut in 2011 in January. I was planning to go there anyway. So this Arab Spring, I was suddenly in Beirut. And what you saw is that everybody held their breath because we thought that Beirut or Lebanon would sort of be but then no, it wasn't Beirut, it was Lebanon. It was Syria. Could you go on that? How quickly the Arab Spring went over to Syria, and civil war started at once.
Of course, the Syrian revolution or uprising or whatever we can call it, because in the beginning it was one thing and then it changed to another thing later over time. We believe that the changes that started in the Middle East, what is called Arab Spring, started in 2005 in Lebanon. And the uprising in Lebanon at that time against the Syrian regime also made an inspiration for everyone, but specifically for the Syrian regime. The fall in Lebanon and the humiliating humiliating way that the Syrian regime went out from Lebanon made its population feel that, well, this is not an iron regime. This is something that we can work on. And we have to believe that the Syrian people are like everyone in the world. They believe that they need their freedom. They believe that the issue of democracy and the right to have their say in the way they are governed is not only for the Western, it's for everyone around the world. Definitely, it's a different issue because we are still tribal, we are still sectarian, but even within this, it's the personal freedom also counts concerning this. It started by because young students wanted to imitate what was happening in Egypt, in Tunisia, probably in Libya as well, and they thought that they could write slogans and say فليسقط حافظ al-Assad, or down with the regime, and oppression and suppression started at that time. However, yeah.
Could I just cut in, because you are telling us about the students. Usually students are in big cities like Damascus and Aleppo. But I would really like to also point out that the first ones who went out on the streets were stateless Kurdish residents in the north of Syria. And I would point out, because I have done research on statelessness in the Middle East, and one of the very first who went out on the streets in Syria were people who don't have citizenship in Syria, up in the north. People without citizenship means there was a census in 1962 and they were counted out. We know this problem in Lebanon also. We have many people who are stateless, بدون قيد, persons without citizenship. And this is really important because it tells us how the border cities between Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Israel, places where people don't have belonging. They were not recognized by the Syrian regime. So they were also, it's important. The students are important, people, the merchants are important, Islamists are important. But remember, there were subjugated also persons of Kurdish origin who were not counted as Syrian citizens. And they were also one of the very first people who went out in the streets demanding citizenship. So I cut out here because this is really important to show why the Kurdish uprising came later on. You see, demanding. So this is why I wanted to make this interruption. But please continue. I would like you to focus more on the internal struggles, not only struggles, but actually killings of a regime suppressing its own citizens in Syria during, after 2011 until 2023.
Concerning the Kurdish issue, it's not a Syrian issue only. It's a multinational issue. It's in the same problem. The Kurdish population in Syria is associated with the Kurdish population in Turkey and in Iraq, and definitely in Iran. We have Kurdish population in Lebanon, but they were granted the. I'm not saying that granting is a good issue for them, the Lebanese nationality. But the first thing that happened that enticed the whole issue started in Dara. And there were young students who wrote it on the walls, and they were taken by the intelligence and interrogated. And then the uprising really started, and all the cities, in all major cities. And this is where things, in the beginning, everyone was talking the same. We want to change the regime. We want democracy. Down with Bashar al-Assad, down with Hafez al-Assad regime. This spent 6 months. And what was Bashar al-Assad hoping for happened, that a military uprising started. And when the military uprising started, this was like what he had hoped for, because he wanted to retaliate in a military fashion, and this started the way. With time, he released the Islamists from his prisons. Anyone knows about, like what happened in Iraq? They released the Islamists. Not even in Iraq with Abu Ghraib issue. This was before the Qaeda started in Iraq, and in Syria he released all the Islamists, the most extremist Islamists from his prisons, a few thousands, and then very fast those extremists became the militant of the Syrian, what is called uprising.
I would like to give the floor to Fadi. Fadi, please, you can come in and ask your question if you have a comment or something.
Yes, if I may, please. I do agree with what Dr. Mustapha and you did say about the Assad regime. And I believe that the Assad regime was the both father and son treated its people harshly. But we shouldn't ignore the external pressures it faced, by the way. I am not defending him, but I am telling the facts, particularly from the United States, to conform to broader geopolitical agendas. This raised an important questions about the role of regional and global powers in the Syrian civil war as well, and more broadly, in the trajectory of all the Arab Spring revolutions. I just want to mention that, not to say that the Syrian war was internal facts only, and I do agree on what it said, but not to forget the regional and global interference in this war. If you want to mention, yeah, sorry.
You are really quite right, and this is a point which we will also go into, because you touch very nicely into the economic collapse of Syria and the humanitarian crisis which has followed, with back to the economic global finance crisis which impacted Syria after 2008. You had hyperinflation, unemployment. You had the international sanctions against Syria. So you are quite right, Fadi, about the impacts on the Syrian internal society and the rising public frustration among Syrians. So I think, we are very, as social scientists or political analysts, we focus on political demands, but sometimes social, economic factors also play a very important role, and you are quite right on pointing out that. Could we move on the civil war? I call it a civil war. I know we have different concepts. The Syrians would like to call it a revolution. For me, as a political scientist, I think when the regime has changed, but we are still in a phase where we really don't know how the new Syrian regime, where it's heading. Syria is still fragmented. Could you please tap into that, Dr. Mustapha, on the fragmentation of Syrian society after the collapse or the ousting of Bashar al-Assad, and how much is it fragmented today compared to how it was fragmented under Bashar al-Assad's regime?
Well, the Bashar al-Assad regime was fragmented since the beginning of what is called uprising or civil war. It doesn't matter now. And so definitely, if we compare it to what was during the Assad reign or during the middle of the war, we can see that, in fact, this is now less fragmented than it was during the Assad regime. But again, we have to remember that there were 500,000 casualties and 11 million people who had to leave their homes and who lost their houses, their lives. And many of them, they know who killed their brother, who killed their mother, and who bombarded their neighborhood. And this is why, despite the fact that we have somehow a more less fragmented regime that probably governs 70% of the Syrian territory or a bit less, but at the same time, within this regime, we have a problem that it came on the backs of like 70,000 militant. Half of them, if you go really and go deeply, you have to put them in prison for being a war criminals. But on the other side, for instance, if you go to the Alawite region, at least half of the young men participated in the Assad regime as Assad regime supporters, and many of them also can be regarded as war criminals. Also, we have to go to the Druze area. This association with the Druze in Israel also makes the situation very precarious. And if you don't have a reliable regime in the capital, then they will find their way and they will still find their support probably in that area. So what I see now, that if this regime will have, and I doubt it, a chance to solidify and to improve on the economy, and this is what is most important for anyone in the world, not only the Syrian, then probably within the next 5-6 years, they can have somehow a unified Syria that can really reunite them. In the meantime, I'm not sure whether this is really this can really happen. In 2014, I was called for a meeting for in Istanbul. I was called by the Alawite community who were against the Bashar Assad regime. And what I advised at that time, that a sort of a federal state based on sectarian and on ethnic alliances should be a transition period until the blood cools down, until the atrocities can be forgotten, and until you see some type of an improvement in the daily life of people, economically speaking. And then you can talk about reunification or not. Now, I don't see, based on what I know from my relatives in the Alawite area, from the Druzes, that my friends in Lebanon, that they doubt that the regime can give them their rights, or can be that they can have equal rights compared to, between brackets, the Sunnis in Syria. Definitely, we care about this issue as Lebanese, because our only way to the outside world, to the inner Arab world, is through Syria. And the situation in Syria has always been positively or negatively affecting, mostly negatively, over the last 70 years. So this is why, well, positively because many of the capitals flew from Syria and came to Lebanon.
People with money. Because this is really important what Dr. Mustapha is saying. You know, we think about the Syrians who fled, that they were poor and they lived in tents. But I have been in Lebanon several times, and you see they're living in nicely in hotels, because you must never forget that Syrians are very good businessmen. So many of them are merchants. You know, they open stores. You see the restaurants even here at Grendel. You see everywhere there are new Syrian restaurants. But Dr. Mustapha, I would like you to sort of, we keep the internal fragmentation of Syria, because despite the internal sort of minority, majority, and all these sections, there are still, Syria is still as an entity, a political entity, still plays a major role as a place where conflict spills over. Like if we take up the thread from Kore and Fadi's intervention in the last webinar on the regional conflict picture with so many big powers, Russia, you know, this is where Bashar al-Assad is staying. How is the relationship between Syria, Russia, Syria, Turkey, Syria, Iran? I mean, these are major regional players. Despite the fragmentation of Syria, Syria still plays a role in these regional connections.
I will start with the end, which is Iran. I can say very clearly that the least important now in Syria is Iran, for the time being. And the so-called fabricated relation between the Alawite sect and Shia sect, it's not valuable, because Shiism is one thing and Alawism is another thing. There is a huge difference, and the pillars of belief are completely different. They have some names that join them together, but in fact, it's so. I don't think that Iran has a major role now. In fact, though it is the major loss for Iran, because it has cut its way to Lebanon completely, and this is what changed the situation in Lebanon. So the spillover is that Iran's role in Lebanon also diminished slightly because of the fall of Bashar al-Assad regime. The role of Turkey is a hopeful role. Turkey is looking for a way to improve on its economy by spreading out, because they failed to spread through Europe. They failed. Erdogan was hoping that he will have an open market in Europe, in people going and coming easily from Turkey to everywhere, but it didn't happen. Later, he started thinking about another way out, and I'm not sure whether part of this war, even the ISIS issue, is also orchestrated for this reason, but it's another completely another discussion now. They are hoping that by opening up Syria for its economic and probably political and military issue, can have also a way through Syria to the Arab world, even to Iraq, to Saudi Arabia, and now they are trying to manage a new relation with the Sunni Arabs, thinking that this will give Turkey a higher role. And definitely, what is Erdogan looking at, and anyone else, is to open the market for their product. Concerning the Russia, for them now at least, what is important is to keep their military base in Tartus. If they keep it, then they can make agreement with the Shara regime. And Ahmed Shara was though you see the pragmatism of the Shara, he did not say that I don't come to Moscow unless you get rid of Bashar al-Assad. This is, I hope that this is a pragmatism, because getting away from the dogmatism is the only way for this regime to survive, or to give some hope for everyone else. So I think that they discussed the issue, and probably Russia will pay for its presence in Tartus, and then things will get even slowly. But what is Shara counting on is only the United States. Is his meeting with tomorrow, or on Monday, with Trump. And Trump is also looking for an area where he can expand his business, not his business, the United States business.
Yes, we have to remember that Syria also has lots of buildings that has to be reconstructed. So not only in Gaza, but also in Syria, many places outside Damascus.
Probably this is a shift, even I'm not sure how long it will last, but this is a shift, a major shift in the way the United States has used and looked at the region for 70, 80, 90 years since the agreement of Roosevelt with the King of Saudi Arabia. So if they really want to have a prosperous relation where they can expand their market in a different way compared to what used to be, Syria should be a major place to start with. The land is cheap. You have a lot of skilled workers. Till now, Lebanese depend on skilled workers in agriculture and in building things. And they have a major know-how present in Norway, in Europe, and even in the United States. So probably this may be, and I'm not sure yet, a way out for Syria and probably for the rest of us. What I'm afraid of as a Lebanese, that Syria will stand ahead of us, and then with the conflict that we still have in Lebanon, and the deadlock that we have in Lebanon, that we cannot even follow. I live in Tripoli, and Tripoli has its port, and I'm afraid that Tartus will become the major entry to the Middle East, instead of Beirut and Tripoli at the same time.
Okay, thank you for that. Fadi, would you like to have a comment or intervention?
Just a question, and I think Dr. Mustapha did approach it. Dr. Mustapha, are we witnessing the rise of a new regime in Syria that resembles the former Assad regime? And from a Lebanese perspective, should we be concerned about the potential implication of this new regime for Lebanon? And I think you did approach it in a way. Thank you.
Well, Fadi, I don't think that there is any place for a similar regime in the area. It may be it may become an authoritarian regime, but at the same time, if they want an economic prosperity, they can be similar to the authoritarian regime in Turkey. So they can imitate that regime, but they can never be like that otherwise they will go and disintegrate anyway. So if they want to remain, they will have to balance between some sort of democracy and some sort of Islamism and some authoritarian regime. But they cannot be the same as it used to be with Bashar al-Assad. Concerning Lebanon, only if the United States will release the Syrian new regime against Hezbollah then we will be in a state of a big problem, and then most probably Lebanon will disintegrate. And when I say disintegrate, many people now believe in Lebanon, and you know it, and you have heard it, that what the greater Lebanon, the Hawaiic Patriarch Hawaiic Lebanon, is not valuable anymore, and they have to resort to the old Mount Lebanon situation. And probably, if you have a prospect of prosperity in Syria, some Sunnis may say, well, we have always been part of Syria, why not now? The real problem and the real tragedy will be on the Shia population in Lebanon.
Thank you.
We have around less than 10 minutes left. So I would urge participants who would like to have questions for you to think of questions. But before we come to the question part, the Q&A part, about 5-6 minutes, I would really like you to say something about Norway's role and the international community, because we are, in Europe. How would you think that Norway and a larger European community, how could we understand, communicate, support forces in Syria, which we can use the word democratic? How could we support?
Well, the negative effect of the Middle East have been spilled out on all Europe, especially on Norway, because the Syrian and Palestinian community there are there, but many of them, they are doing fine, and they are being supported by the Norwegian population and the state. Now, if we want to see this, we have to do, you have to do, or the European Union has to do its best to support the economy in Syria, but balance it always with reforms. Start with small steps. You cannot force a Nordic mentality on the tribal and the sectarian population in there. However, economy can change even the gods. So we have to work on economy. We have to work on the daily life of the Syrian, Lebanese, probably others, in order to give a chance for a democratic change. However, if people are not living well or don't have a prospect of living well, then all atrocities and dictatorship will rise again.
As somebody who is very occupied with education, I would also say that students in Norway from Syrian background are really doing their toll in Norway. And I'm talking about a very small university college in Fredrikstad, where I hear the Syrian dialect every day. And this is really strange. I mean, I've been living in Fredrikstad the past 50 years. I have heard Arabic, but today at my small university, we have like 6,000 students. I can hear the Syrian dialect everywhere, and they are really doing a good job. So I'm glad that you pointed out that it's not only that we as Norwegians will be perhaps, hopefully, helping economic recovery. Perhaps I think the Syrians will do the job themselves in one way or another. Being educated, doing good work as productive citizens in Norway, because I have to remind people here that what we have been calling the Syrian refugees in Norway or Europe, they will become the new European citizens of Syrian background. So we have to look forward and see that there will be some changes here because of the really massive influx within Europe this year marks a 10-year, a decade 2015 until 2025. So there will be some, I think, interesting changes with integration at the labor market, education, economic restructuring, all this stuff. With these comments, I would really like to open the floor to see if anyone has any questions. Please, Bjarte and Bente. Bente first, please.
Okay. Thank you for a very comprehensive and informative talk. Thank you for that. I have a question when it comes to Rojava and the autonomy of the Kurdish people there, which has previously under Assad at least been some kind of fairly good model. Of course, Erdogan has done his best to kill them off, but he hasn't succeeded. So my question is, how will al-Shara treat the autonomy of the Kurds in the Rojava region? Thank you.
Well, again, we are focusing on an issue which is not only related to Syria. And if we look at that all ethnic groups should have their autonomy, then we are talking about a different kind of states in the region. So the Kurdish issue is not only Syrian, it's also Iraqi, it's also Turkish, and to some extent Iranian. So how can you convince all of these four countries to give part of their land and tell that the autonomy, and when we say autonomy, it doesn't mean that, well, a federal state here or not. You're talking about uniting all the Kurdish origin, and there are like 22 million people between the four countries and to form their own state. So do you believe that this is a possible issue now? I'm not sure. I believe that forcing unity, forcing people to stay in a state by the rule of law or by force does not work anymore. But giving a prosperous future, well, you have Kurdish population in Norway. Are they asking for a separate state there? No. You have like 1 million Kurds in Germany. They are not asking for a separate.
But sorry to interrupt, but my question is how al-Shara will treat the Kurds in the north, in Rojava region. That's my only question.
They are not. They are. I'm not sure how he is now. He says that he's doing well, and he's working at reuniting the Kurds as citizens, Syrian citizens. This is what he's saying. But how he's treating? He's not treating anything because the Kurds have their own militia and military, and their real enemy now, for them at least, is Turkey, and it's not Shara. Shara cannot do anything for them for the time being. I'm not sure about tomorrow, about the next year, but at least for the time being, their problem is with Turkey, not with Shara.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then there's Bjarte, please.
Yeah, briefly, it's a big topic, but about healing the wounds of the past, all the atrocities and so on. What do you see as possible ways into the future of transitional justice? Will there be any? And if so, what kind of, or will it just be a political process? Because in Lebanon, which has some similarities from the civil war, the wounds have not been healed and the trust not rebuilt, and that continues to be a problem.
Well, this is an issue that we have tried to discuss all the time. And if you want to bring all war criminals in Syria, at least for the time being, to be judged and to go to the tribunal, then probably you have to bring 2-3 million people that were part of the war. And so who should we bring? Now you have, and who will get whom? So you have someone who has gained the war for the time being, at least, and in his troops, he also has war criminals in his troop. Will he get him to tribunal? And if you go to the area in the Alawite area, and I also have, as I told you, many of my relatives are living there. They are living in a lot of fear for their future. But this fear is not only based because the other is an enemy. In fact, because they know what their relatives have done before, and you have thousands and thousands of war criminals in that area. If you want to go and treat everyone, and then, as I told you, probably 500,000 will go to jail, 3 million will go to trial. Then this is why I believe, from our point of view, we didn't have healed wounds, but we managed at least. And the war that we have now is not related to the wounds of the 1975 war. It's a new thing. It's the loss of a state. We didn't have a state since 1943. We didn't have a state in Lebanon. It was just a coalition between tribal and sectarian rulers. In Syria, I believe that the only way to, and I said it before, is to have a federation, a federal state with in the Alawite area, another in the Kurdish, another in the Druze area, and then from there on try to find a way. With time, all wounds will heal. I have to remind you that you have a European Union, despite a terrible war in 1939. So, and a history of atrocity between European powers for 1,000 years, probably.
And also with these words, I would say that maybe the Syrians in Germany could learn about how the German state was assembled with 31 small Bundesrepublik. So maybe they can come back to Syria and do what you suggest that they do to make a federation, because this is what Germany is actually. And the Nuremberg trial, then to focus on both of them. So with these words, Dr. Mustapha, I thank you so much for joining us with these excellent views, comments, and historical overview. And I thank also all those who have been present. I believe the day is over. Would you like to say any words, Beate, or somebody else? Or should I say, have a nice Saturday? Or thank you.
Grønn torsdag.